The wind screamed down the Rydell Range like a living thing, dragging stinging ice crystals across Mara Keaton's face. Her breath fogged the scope for a heartbeat before she eased it clear. 940 yards away, an enemy spotter shifted behind a jagged basalt outcrop, his thermal camouflage shimmering faintly against the snowfields. In the narrow mountain pass below, the lead vehicle in Colonel Hart's convoy was burning, black smoke twisting up into the pale winter sky. "Keaton, that's a no-go." The voice in her earpiece was sharp, panicked. "You're not weapons qualified. Stand down." She didn't answer. The radio might as well have been ice in her ear. Her left hand locked the rifle's forend into the snowpack. Her right index finger took up the slack on the trigger. Wind shear, 12 knots from the northwest. Elevation, 6,300 feet above sea level. Temperature differential at target layer, minus 18 degrees Celsius. The math was second nature, burned into muscle memory she wasn't supposed to have anymore. She could hear her old instructor's voice in her head, calm and relentless. "Cold air is heavy, Keaton. It drops the round faster. Compensate." The enemy sniper had been firing for 20 minutes, pinning the convoy in place while mortar teams bracketed the pass. Every minute Hart's team stayed in the kill zone meant more dead. Every second Mara stayed still meant her lungs burned in the freezing air. She exhaled. A slow, steady push of air. The reticle settled. The shot broke. The sound was swallowed by the wind, but a second later the spotter's scope flared in the snow, glass and steel exploding in a flash of sunlight. A dark figure crumpled against the rocks. The pass went silent, except for the hiss of wind through the peaks. 2 weeks before that shot, Mara Keaton was invisible. At Fort Granite, invisibility wasn't a tactical advantage, it was social exile. The base clung to the cliffs of the Rydell Range like a stubborn growth of steel and concrete, its buildings chained to the rock with reinforced struts to keep them from sliding off in winter avalanches. Here, the wind never slept. It howled through the antenna arrays, rattled loose siding, and screamed down ventilation shafts like a warning from the mountain itself. The soldiers stationed here learned fast: either you respected the terrain, or it killed you. Mara respected it. The men in her unit didn't respect her. "Keaton," Sergeant Pike had said that morning, tossing her a grease-smeared rag. "The 50 cal mounts in Bay 3 need cleaning. Again. Try not to break anything this time." She'd caught the rag without flinching. "They're already cleaned. Twice this week." Pike grinned, the kind of grin that wasn't friendly. "Then clean them a third time. Just in case." Around the maintenance bay, a few soldiers snickered. She knew the drill: give her the menial jobs, keep her off any live-fire lists, and pretend she wasn't capable of more. No one mentioned the fact she'd graduated near the top of her class at the North Ridge Marksman course. No one cared. Officially, Mara had been dropped from advanced sniper qualification for failing her night vision targeting evaluation. Unofficially, she knew better. The night she was supposed to pass her final, she'd landed 3 perfect shots, and none of them registered on the electronic scoring system. The next day, an anonymous equipment malfunction report made it vanish from the logs. The day after that, she was reassigned to logistics. She'd learned to swallow the humiliation. But she never forgot. In the dim light of the armory, she ran an oil rag over a disassembled M24 rifle. It wasn't hers, she wasn't even supposed to handle it, but she cleaned every inch as if it were. There was a certain peace in the precision of it. That, and the knowledge that in her head she could still see targets at half a mile, and calculate the drop in a single breath. The night qualification range was black as oil, lit only by the faint red glow of instrument panels and the cold burn of starlight over the Rydell Range. Mara lay prone behind the rifle, breath slow, eyes locked on the thermal silhouettes that flickered in and out along the distant ridge. "Targets will appear for 3 seconds only." The instructor's voice crackled in her headset. "No second chances. Fire on my mark. Keaton, you're up first." She adjusted her cheek weld, fingertips brushing the trigger guard. "Steady, don't rush it." A faint metallic click behind her made her brow crease. Instructors and range staff usually stayed off the firing line once the test began. But before she could glance back, the first target flashed into being, a glowing white chest-shaped outline at 700 yards. Bang! It disappeared. She hit the next two without hesitation, 800 yards, then 900. Each impact felt perfect, as natural as breathing. But the electronic scoreboard to her right stayed stubbornly at 0/3. Keaton! Sergeant Durnell's voice oozed over the channel. You planning on hitting anything tonight? Laughter rippled over the comms from the other shooters waiting their turn. Mara's jaw tightened. Next set of targets, same result. 3 perfect shots, 3 unregistered hits. By the time the sequence ended, she'd landed all 15 in her mind, but the scoreboard showed a humiliating 0/15. After the test, she overheard Durnell speaking in low tones with Corporal Vince Mora, one of the golden boys of the course. You're clear, Durnell said. Sensor cables were swapped before she got here. I'll file it under faulty equipment. Mora chuckled. Told you, Sarge, no way she makes the cut. That was the last night she ever wore a marksman's patch. The reassignment orders came the next morning. Logistics. Permanent. No appeal. Life at Fort Granite followed the rhythm of the mountains, harsh, repetitive, and utterly unforgiving. The sun barely cleared the peaks before the wind started tearing down the pass, rattling metal siding and filling the air with fine, biting snow that never seemed to melt. Mara's days blurred together. Morning, inventory checks in the Sub-Zero supply bunker. Afternoon, cleaning and recleaning weapons she would never be authorized to fire. Evening, hauling crates of ammunition to storage rooms so cold the cartridges seemed to frost over in her hands. The others treated her like a fixture, the way you treat a battered coffee maker in the mess hall, useful but not worth a second thought. Private Jory, barely 20 and convinced he was God's gift to the infantry, made a sport of it. Hey Keaton, he called one night in the mess hall. You ever think of joining the actual army? You know, where they shoot guns? A couple of his buddies laughed into their trays. Mara didn't answer. She had learned that her silence unnerved them more than any comeback could. Instead, she focused on her rehydrated stew and listened to the wind hammer the outer walls. But she noticed things. Every time they ran marksmanship drills, she was, accidentally, left off the roster. Every time there was a live-fire range rotation, her name disappeared from the sign-up sheet. If a spot needed filling, they called a raw recruit before they called her. Her quarters were a converted storage room at the far edge of the base, a constant low hum from the generator outside her window. At night, she'd dry fire with an imaginary rifle, muscle memory keeping her grip, breathing, and trigger squeeze sharp. She still carried a small, battered ballistic notebook. Wind charts, distance conversions, personal notes, and cramped handwriting. She filled it like other soldiers filled journals. What they didn't know was that she had been quietly keeping her skills alive. Waiting. The orders came down on a brittle, cloudless morning when the peaks looked sharp enough to cut the sky. Colonel Hart, commander of the Regional Mountain Defense Sector, would be making a surprise inspection of the forward listening posts scattered along the Rydell Range. The convoy would be small, 4 armored transports and 2 escort vehicles. The route wound through Frostglass Pass, a narrow defile carved by centuries of glacial ice, with cliffs rising on both sides like jagged white walls. It was the kind of terrain that funneled wind into vicious shears and made GPS signals bounce like bad radio static. On paper, it was a routine trip. Intel sweeps from drone flights showed no unusual activity. The forward scouts reported nothing but the usual cold and wind. Still, the pass was infamous. Every unit stationed at Fort Granite knew the stories. Convoys that vanished without a trace, sniper fire that came from nowhere and left no survivors. If an ambush came here, there would be no flanking escape, only steel and stone funneling vehicles into the kill zone. Inside the command bunker, Captain Hensley went over the mission outline. Escort team will keep the Colonel's transport center column. ETA to Outpost Delta is 70 minutes. Weather clear. Snow squalls possible after 1500 hours. Mara was in the back of the room, logging the convoy's supply manifest into the computer. She wasn't even supposed to be in the briefing, she was only there because someone had to record the outbound ammunition count. From where she stood, she could see the tactical map projected on the wall. Frostglass Pass was a red thread between two vast white expanses. She traced it with her eyes and felt something cold stir in her gut. "Looks quiet," Pike muttered beside her, his tone smug. "Even you couldn't screw this one up, Keaton." She ignored him. But she didn't like the look of that pass. Too narrow. Too perfect. And if she was right, the mountain wind would be shifting from north to south by midday, a sniper's dream for masking sound. The engines coughed to life before sunrise, their exhaust plumes curling into the pale winter air. Snow crunched under heavy tires as the armored convoy lined up outside the motor pool gates. Colonel Hart's vehicle sat in the center of the column, its matte paint blending into the icy backdrop. Mara watched from the loading dock, clipboard in hand, checking off the last of the munitions crates being secured to the lead escort. Her breath came in visible bursts, each one snatched away by the wind. "Don't get frostbite standing there, Keaton," Pike called from the passenger seat of Vehicle 2. "This isn't your show." She didn't reply. She simply noted the final crate, signed the manifest, and stepped back as the convoy began to crawl forward. The first hour went exactly as planned. Radio chatter was minimal, mostly route confirmations and weather updates. The mountains were quiet, unnervingly so. The only sounds were the deep growl of engines and the occasional crack of ice shifting on the cliffs above. Then the wind changed. At first it was subtle, a slow curling from the north instead of the west, carrying with it a dry hiss through the rocks. Mara, monitoring supply stock from the comm station back at Fort Granite, felt her scalp prickle. She had tracked wind patterns in these mountains for months. She knew this shift meant one thing: sound would carry in strange, broken ways, making it harder to pinpoint its source. "Convoy at checkpoint 3, the radio announced. "Visibility holding." Mara leaned closer to the map screen, tracing the convoy's blinking icons as they entered Frostglass Pass. Narrow walls rose steeply on either side, jagged stone with plenty of overhangs, crevices, and snow pockets big enough to hide a team. She didn't notice she was gripping her pen tight enough to leave marks in her palm. The first shot sounded like a crack in the ice, sharp, distant, almost swallowed by the wind. It was followed by another, then a third. In the pass, the lead escort lurched sideways, its driver slamming the brakes. Over comms, Mara heard the clipped, urgent call. "Contact front! Sniper fire! Lead vehicle disabled." The transmission dissolved into static. A moment later, the feed from the convoy's forward dash cam went black. She switched to the backup channel, only to catch fragments. "Pinned down, mortar impacts, can't locate." Then a deep, rolling boom rattled the bunker walls. The second escort had taken a direct hit somewhere along the cliff face. A plume of snow and rock tumbled into the road, cutting off the convoy's retreat. "Get me a visual!" Captain Hensley barked. Operators scrambled to switch the perimeter drones to the convoy's coordinates. The feeds came up jittery and blurred, their signal distorted by deliberate interference. The air shimmered in unnatural waves above the pass, heat blooms from somewhere they couldn't see. The colonel's voice broke through, calm but tight. "We are taking precision fire from elevated positions. At least 2 shooters. Request counter-sniper immediately." "Negative," Hensley said grimly. "All Granite-qualified marksmen are on the western front. Closest team is 30 miles out." Mara's eyes locked on the map. The attack's geometry was textbook, one shooter pinning from the east, another working the flank from the west, herding the convoy into the kill box. And there, a high ridge above the western wall, angled perfectly for both concealment and long-range overwatch. She knew that ridge. She'd run wind tests there months ago. If she was right, that's where the lead shooter was. And nobody else on base would even think to look there. The command bunker was a storm of noise, overlapping voices, static-laced comms, the thud of boots on concrete. No one looked at Mara. No one asked her opinion. But the clock in her head was ticking. If the shooters held their position another 5 minutes, mortar teams would finish the job. Hart's convoy wouldn't survive. She stepped toward the observation equipment, eyes locked on the faint heat trace she'd spotted earlier, a human silhouette crouched low against the ridge rocks, its scope catching rare flashes of light. "I can make that shot," she said. Hensley didn't even look up. "You're not authorized to carry a weapon, Keaton. Sit down. You don't have anyone else." Her voice cut through the chaos, colder than the wind outside. Pike, manning one of the radios, scoffed. "You think cleaning rifles makes you a sniper? I think hitting a 900-yard shot in 20-knot wind does." The captain waved her off, already barking new orders. That was the moment Mara knew no one was coming. If she wanted the convoy alive, she had to do it herself. She grabbed her personal M24 from her locker, technically contraband, an unregistered keepsake, from her qualification days, and a small pack of match-grade rounds. Without another word, she slipped out the side exit into the teeth of the wind. The climb to Overlook Ridge was brutal. Ice crusted every foothold, and the air thinned to a burning cold that clawed at her lungs. By the time she belly crawled into position, her hands were trembling from more than just adrenaline. She flattened the bipod into the snow, locked the rifle in place, and began calculating. Wind, gusting 18 to 22 knots from the north. Range, 942 yards. Elevation, plus 11 degrees. Target exposure, 3 seconds between shifts. She dialed the scope, made micro-adjustments, and exhaled until the cold burned her teeth. Through the reticle, the enemy sniper was just another dark figure against white, steady, methodical, lethal. She waited for the shift in his position. There, a flash of lens. The trigger broke clean. Even at that range, she saw the impact, a sudden spray of glass and the figure collapsing sideways into the snow. The valley went still. The second shooter, realizing the overwatch was gone, broke position and fled. Mortar fire ceased. Colonel Hart's voice came over the emergency channel, tight but alive. "Whoever took that shot, you just saved my convo." Back at Fort Granite, Mara walked into the bunker carrying the rifle she wasn't supposed to have. The room fell silent. Captain Hensley stared at her. "That was you?" "Yes, sir." "You broke direct orders. And saved your CO." Sergeant Williams, the oldest man on base, said from the corner. He stepped forward, eyes locked on Mara. "You ever wonder why she's been in logistics?" Asked Durnall and Mora about the night qualification. The story came out fast after that. Tampered sensors. Fake scores. A report buried under. Equipment malfunction. The room shifted from disbelief to a kind of quiet, simmering shame. Colonel Hart arrived an hour later, boots still crusted with snow. He didn't ask for explanations. He simply said, "From this day, Specialist Keaton will serve in whatever role her capability justifies. And we're going to find out how many more soldiers we've buried under politics." Within a month, Fort Granite's evaluation system was overhauled, blind scoring, double verification, zero tolerance for sabotage. Mara wasn't the only one brought back from obscurity. But hers was the shot they remembered. On the anniversary of the Frostglass Pass ambush, the brass sent Mara's ballistic notebook to the Mountain Warfare Museum, still filled with her cramped handwriting. The plaque beneath it read, "Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the rifle. It's refusing to let anyone else define your range."